What if the story you are not telling is the very thing holding your business back? Today's guest, Renee Frojo, believes that your story is your strategy. Hi, I'm Park Howell, and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm eager for you to hear from this former journalist turned storytelling coach who helps purpose-driven entrepreneurs and service-based professionals rediscover their voice, reconnect with their mission, and reignite their marketing through authentic storytelling. From exposing shark finning in Ecuador to launching a thriving storytelling cohort with one powerful LinkedIn post, Renee's journey is all about finding meaning, embracing vulnerability, and building a brand with heart. If you've lost your passion or feel overwhelmed by the noise of online marketing, Renee will show you how to put your story back in service to your business. So tune in and let's turn your personal truth into your professional superpower. As an active listener of the Business of Story, you know that we are now in the throes of our beta testers using the Story Cycle Genie, and we have our soft launch scheduled for just after the 4th of July. You can register for the soft launch, no credit card required now, and get bonuses, including free access to the ABTs of Storytelling micro-training course, a free digital copy of both the Narrative Gym for Business and Brand Bewitchery. Plus, you'll get 20% off your brand story strategy investment with the Story Cycle Genie if you register now for the soft launch at businessofstory.com/storycycle-genie. Since the beginning of the year, I've run about 80 brands through the Genie and shared the findings with their business founders and owners. They tell me that the Genie validates what they're doing well with their brand narrative. It reveals gaps and missed opportunities in their storytelling that they can fix quickly, and it inspires them with fresh ways to tell their stories so that they can connect deeply with their audiences and convert them to lifelong raving customers. Here's what our beta testers are saying about their experience using the Story Cycle Genie.
And it's legit. I mean, it really is. It's legit. I haven't had time to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, but it certainly was very, very powerful and useful, Park.
I thought it did a really good job of really just homing in on the essence of who we are and what it is we're seeking to achieve without, 75 different documents or blog posts or videos or web pages or what have you.
It's faster than doing it yourself. All of Park's knowledge, the structured framework, which I know, the proven thing, it never doesn't work. It's the core of what you do, plus all these examples here, and you will quickly clarify your core brand story, and you can iterate it to get close, if you're not that close, right? And everything else, and here's 52 things that people have created with it.
I thought it was great. It was very easy. I had a lot of collateral, obviously, with the website that it was able to dig through. It went through it very quickly. I'll tell you that I was thoroughly impressed with everything I got. I read through everything. I like some of the talking points that it created in here. We're an old boot, right? We're a 40-year-old company. We're not a new guy, right? We're not a new story. Our story's old, but it really gave me some new perspective, and I think it's exciting.
Yeah, but I had fun. I had fun, and it's so, look, it is a genie, isn't it? Like it's magic. It really is magic.
Now, you know the power of a crystal clear brand story, right? But if you've ever attempted to create a brand narrative strategy, you probably face that universal dilemma of you can have it fast, cheap, or good. Pick two. We call this the trilemma. Don't feel bad. We've all been conditioned to these ridiculous limitations. Well, the Story Cycle Genie shatters the trilemma of fast, cheap, and good by providing you a brilliant brand narrative strategy in minutes, not months. with instant, compelling content creation based on your unique and authoritative brand story, and you get it all at a fraction of the cost of the old traditional way of branding. Think of it as your irreplaceable branding content agency in a bottle. So register today for our early July 2025 launch at businessofstory.com/storycycle-genie and let your brand genius out of the bottle with brilliant, brisk, and breathtakingly affordable branding. I ran Renee Frojo's brand through the Story Cycle Genie, and you'll hear later in the show her thoughts on what the Genie revealed. So let's get after it. Good morning, Renee. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Park. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, well, I'm excited to talk to you. You're coming to us from the Bay Area. Does that mean you are a technologist like everybody seems to be in the Bay Area?
No, I actually have an aversion to those people. No, just kidding.
Why so?
No, I'm kidding. No, I come to the Bay Area by way of Auburn, Alabama, spent some time in Boston and then DC, and then I traveled around the world with my ex-husband, and we landed in the Bay Area after that around the world trip, simply because we had some friends who were generous enough to put us up for a month while we looked for jobs and rebuilt our life in the States after this gap
And
year.
you liked it so much, you decided to stick around.
Well, the story was really that his job kept us here, and I am glad I stuck around, though. Yeah, I feel like I finally really put down roots because the Bay Area is really, I like to call it the land of 1,000-day trips. Really, there's
Yeah.
just so much opportunity and things to experience beyond San Francisco. But yeah, sure enough, I did find myself in a little bit of the startup tech scene in my career here. So
Now, wait a minute. Ex-husband and aversion to techies. Was he in technology? Is that where this is all coming from? Are we digging up old bones?
well, my whole shtick is personal storytelling, so sure, why not? No, he's a biotech investor. So, I mean, yes,
Wow.
so technically some tech, some finance, but I have talked recently sort of unpacking what I think ultimately led to the end of my marriage and how it's actually been a point of real inspiration and learning that has fueled a lot of my work and the work that I do today and how I show up publicly and build this personal brand to fuel my business in a way that's been not only really effective in terms of business building, but also really personally fulfilling. So there's a story there, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
unpacked it recently in my latest newsletter, and I got a big response, as I think sharing a little bit more depth typically does. So
Yeah, that whole vulnerability
yeah,
play that people talk so much about, but it's so hard to
hard to
do.
do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you started out as a journalist before you've gotten into the business storytelling coaching world. And let's talk about that. And how did that lead into your story is your strategy framework? I'm really curious to hear about that.
Mm-hmm. The short story is I've always loved hearing people's stories, right? Since I was a little kid. And journalism was sort of a natural, I think, first career for me because I just got to follow my curiosity and ask lots of questions and sort of find the story behind the story and bring that story to other people. I've always also been very entrepreneurial. I think it runs in my family. My family is a long line of entrepreneurs and self-starters. And so I think I was fascinated by all these people who were building their businesses. And that's how I started. I was a business journalist in San Francisco. My first job was
And
actually as a FDA reporter, but that's only because that's
FDA, it doesn't get any more
no
exciting
more
than
exciting
that.
than that. Yeah, that was my very first job out of college. I was just grateful for the experience. I got to be on Capitol
Absolutely.
Hill, so there were definitely some stories that came out of that too.
Oh, well, that's cool. And you had kind of an interesting way to coax stories out of your sources that maybe someone, as new to the journalism world may not have had the guts to do, or maybe the insight to do. Could you share what you did?
I I followed my curiosity. And I just didn't assume that I was young, right? So I never assumed that I knew more than anybody else. And I really wanted to understand their perspective on something as I was sort of shaping my own in all these areas. And I think I just learned to ask really good questions that went beyond surface level. And essentially, it's like, but why does that matter? And so what? And so what then? Right. And it's kind of like that first order, second order, third order thinking where you ask, and then what? And why does that matter? And you really get to a little bit more depth and meaning and an interesting nuance of perspective, right? And so I think that was really my strategy. And then also sometimes, honestly, I just kind of played dumb a little bit.
How so?
I'll give you an example. Before I landed in San Francisco and started reporting for the Business Times, I on this around the world trip, I wanted to try my hand at freelancing for the first time and see if I could really build a freelancing career. And one of the places I ended up on this around the world trip was Ecuador. And Ecuador is, really has built a reputation around, being a place for biodiversity where you come to do ecotourism, and you go see the Galapagos, and like they have this whole story around like sort of being a little bit more forward thinking in terms of preserving, the environment and being a place where you go. So I landed there and I was volunteering at this biomarine research nonprofit, where I was like getting to go on a boat to an island where I like literally hand counted how many blue-footed boobies there were on the island. I actually don't even know what the research was for.
And these aren't tourists.
These aren't
right?
tourists. No, this was yeah. No, they're a type of bird. It's going
Sorry about
extinct.
that.
But I was on the beach once and I noticed that all these sharks were coming up on the shore and these fishing boats. And I knew that there was, shark fishing, shark finning was illegal. But I also knew at the same time that shark fins were like a delicacy, especially in places like China and Hong Kong. And there was a big market for it, but I knew that this was illegal. And so I just kind of started playing dumb. I was like, well, that's a lot of fish. That's a lot of sharks that are coming up on the shore. What's that about? Well, if they get caught in your net, there's a certain amount that okay, but like why do none of them have their and I knew the answer and I knew what was happening, but I was just kind of playing dumb and I'm like, I'm just curious as to what I'm seeing here. I ended up writing a story that got published in the BBC about this and then got a very official government letter saying I wasn't welcome in the country again for like exposing this thing. But that was almost 15
They actually
years
tossed
ago.
you out?
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe I'm sure I'd be able to get in at this point with my passport, or maybe it was just a threat. They didn't.
But that's impact too. And some of the notes that I read in preparing for our interview, another tactic, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I gathered out of it is that you would show up as just yourself, not a journalist, and you would be sharing a lot of insights in who you are. So you are actually befriending these sources. Is that right?
Yes. That definitely as I matured a little bit in my career as a journalist, and that's definitely something that I've brought into building my business now is, really trying to make that personal connection, that relatability, because it's a basic principle of communication. I don't know if you've had the author of the book, Super Communicators. What's his name? Have you read that book? It was really popular last year. I think it was one of the bestsellers. He's a former journalist as well, and he wanted to find out what makes these super communicators that are able to get things out of people that nobody else is. It's like CIA agents or super communicators, right? Like really effective podcast goes. And one of the pieces is that they openly share, reveal a piece of themselves, and therefore open up a space, an opportunity, a safe space for someone else to share something personal in return. Right.
I just looked it up while you were talking. That's Charles Duhigg.
Yes.
Duhigg. So, okay, just for the listeners out there, super communicator. I've not read it, so I'll have to look that up. But what you're talking about is do something that connects. And, my wife and I were just listening to Matthew McConaughey's new book called Green Lights. And of course, he's a phenomenal writer. And he has pulled from like 35 years of journaling and then has, created this book out of it. And of course, he reads it. So we were listening to it driving up from Phoenix the other day. And he told a story that is what you're talking about, I think, here. And it was when he was in high school. His mom was kind of like mixed up in this MLM, and she wanted him to use this product on his face to help cure his acne when he was like a sophomore in high school. But it did just the exact opposite. It inflamed it. He looked horrible. The doctor said he was going to be scarred for life. And his dad was a very industrious con man in some ways that he talks about. And he goes, "Oh, son, we're going to make a fortune off this." And they found an attorney and they went and sued the company. And of course, as the case happens, it took a couple years. And Matthew's telling this whole story. It's just brilliant. And the day when he has to go and see the defense counsel, he has just graduated from high school. He's sitting down. Of course, his face wasn't wrecked, but that's what their contention was. And that as he reads it, as he tells it, this counsel said, "Hey, Matthew, how you doing? Oh, yeah, I've got a son that's roughly your age. And boy, that must have been really scary and what you went through," and just totally befriended Matthew. And he's just like, "Boy, this guy's great. This is going to be a cakewalk." And then the defense attorney, right when he has completely disarmed him, pulls out the book, and shows a picture of Matthew and this woman next to him, named the most beautiful and most handsome couple in the high school. And right then he goes, "Oh, I don't think we're going to make any money from this at all." And his dad was crestfallen that he had blown it like that. But with what you're talking about, that's exactly the story in the way he shared it. The defense counsel befriended him and then got in under his skin.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I caution people not to use it manipulatively, right? But in some ways,
Use
they
it for
can use
good
it for
and not
good.
evil.
Exactly. And it's, I mean, it's, story can definitely be used and is often used for evil and not good.
Now, just take a look at our current administration. They
They
weaponize it every single
they
day.
do weaponize story. They're very effective storytellers. They've been able to tell a very powerful story.
Yeah.
And that is the thing about stories, as you know, they don't necessarily need to be true. They just need to be believable
Emotive.
and emotive.
Exactly right. So how did you move from journalism into business and story coaching?
I basically got a little burnt out on deadlines, and the whole media landscape was shifting as I was entering the field, right? I mean, it was completely transforming because of social media. And I recognized that the traditional keepers of information, the traditional media structure was completely crumbling, and anyone could build their own little media empire. Any brand could control the story and the narrative and create, become influential doing this. And so I became interested in how people were doing that and how I could maybe build my own little media empire and not have to rely on the traditional structure to get ideas across and to tell people stories. And so I was also very interested. I was in San Francisco reporting. One of my main beats was restaurants and retail, and I got really into the food scene. And so I thought, well, I could do this. And my first foray into online business and brand building was a food blog. So I started with a food blog. I built a social media audience. I kind of understood a little bit of business and brand building through that, but I didn't stick with it because I got bored just talking about food all the time. I felt like there were so many more stories to tell, and I wanted to follow my interest in so many other areas, and so that's when I translated that into content marketing and then brand building, which is branding is just learning how to tell a good story, right? Is owning your story and effectively communicating that story to an audience creating a community of believers and people who feel like they belong, in your little world, your little brand world that you've created. And that's essentially how I ended up here.
And so tell us a little bit then about how you arrived at this idea of your story is your strategy, and you've got a framework that people can follow.
Yeah. Well, I think that it was because branding and brand marketing and content marketing has just become so complicated. Marketers ruin everything. They just overcomplicate it and add more detail than necessary and strategies and frameworks. And so you never really went down the whole SEO path. And thank goodness, I'm glad I didn't build my career around that, because that's, evolving.
Oh my God, I'll tell you, Renee, that's what drove me out of
Right?
advertising. I started in the traditional fun times, and then once you got into digital marketing and SEO, and
They make it
my brain's
less
not wired for
fun.
that.
They make it
Yes.
less fun. And what I think I realized in trying to, develop my own framework, make sense of all of this, and just build powerful, effective brands was what has never changed, right? Like the principles and foundation of effective brand building that'll never change, that are never evolve, even with AI and the algorithms, is the principles of storytelling and human psychology, right? So if you can understand basic human psychology and how to tell a good story, right? Then that is your whole that you don't need more strategy than that. That is the strategy.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I work with a lot more personal brands now, service-based business entrepreneurs like you and I, who are building your businesses. I still work with some traditional startups, but it's the same process. It's first getting very clear on your mission, your vision, right? The vision of the world that you want to see, that ultimately that's what you get buy-in for. And that's what you build a community around. We are going against the status quo, or the way that things have always been done, and creating a new future. So it's getting very clear on that, and then sort of the rules of your world that you're building. So those are your values, the things that you stand against, the things that you stand for, who belongs in this tribe and who doesn't, right? How do I identify? And then it's getting very clear on the things that your audience cares about, right? Really digging into the psychographics, their fears, their goals, their desires, the impact they want to have on the world. So it goes beyond just what's their problem and what are the buying triggers. And then it's finding the intersection of those two things. So where do our mission, where does our vision, where do our values, where's what the story that we're telling for the future that we want, where does that intersect with the things that matter to you and that you care about as our ideal customer audience? That's the
Yeah.
story, right?
Well, Renee, give us an example of how you've done this with someone, and where maybe they were floundering or they just didn't have the growth that they wanted to, and then you came in and through your story as a strategy framework built it, and what was the outcome?
Yeah. Well, let's see. What's the best example? And the most recent, so I've been working a lot with one-on-one with people, and I decided to give this a try as a group. So I launched my first cohort, my experimental cohort. And I mean, I'm the best case study. I sold this thing with one LinkedIn post. I said, after a year of brand building, I said, I've been thinking about doing a group cohort to teach short form storytelling to grow your business and your brand. Anyone interested? That got me on 25 sales calls, and I closed 6, which was the perfect test group for my first little cohort. So I got 6 people in this cohort. I literally was building the plane as I was
ask you
flying
real
it.
quick,
Yeah.
Renee. So you've got 25 on there, which is a great return on a little,
On a little
story on LinkedIn. You closed 6. Why do you think the other 19 didn't sign up?
Part of it was it was really a quick turnaround. I said I'm launching these things within a certain date. It was 3 weeks from that. It was kind of a strict time frame too. It was like, we're meeting on Mondays and we're meeting at Thursdays at this time. And that was heard with some people's schedules. So some people just couldn't fit into their schedules at that point in time. They felt like they were going to miss too many live sessions where they knew a lot of the good learning was going to happen. And then cost was an issue for some people. So
What'd you charge
I
for it?
only charged $850 a pop, which I
Hmm.
thought was pretty good
Yeah.
for my beta round, and the people that did it knew that they were going to be giving me just as much feedback as I was and learning.
But you give them a ton of
I gave
value in
them
the
a ton of value
process.
in the process. Now everyone came out so happy, in fact, that they want me to spin it into a more evergreen community so that we can stay in community and continue learning with each other. So I'm
Yeah.
working on that.
Real quick on that, you did something really smart, I believe, from a book that I read called The Right It. When you're trying to roll something out and trying to determine is there a market for this or not, instead of just giving it to them, that then they're grateful that they go through it. And when you ask for feedback, you don't get accurate feedback because they don't want to let you
Right.
down since you gave it to them. But by having them vested in it and you providing tremendous amount of value, and in return, ask them for their input so that you can fine tune it. And I'm sharing this with you and with all of our listeners because we did the exact same thing, and I pulled it from that book, The Right It, for the launch of our Story Cycle Genie. And we had 20 beta testers, and they each paid $500 to be a part of it. And people, I just came from a coffee, as a matter of fact, and a marketer guy said, well, you can't just keep giving it away. And I go, well, we didn't give it away. We charged them $500. And he goes, wait a minute, you had a beta test and they paid you to be
Yes.
participants? And I said,
Amazing
but
how
we
that
gave them a tremendous amount of value for that 500, not only from what they got from the Genie, but then individual calls with me, like with you in your cohort, that we coached them up. And while I was coaching them, then in return, they would give us the input on the Genie. So I think you did something really smart with your initial beta cohort.
Well,
there.
I appreciate it. And that is how I approach a lot of my marketing is just a series of experiments, right? Let's test this out. Let's test this out with a small sample size before going all in or spending months on the strategy or the branding, I threw up a pretty crappy little little landing page for it. And
But to your earlier point, you
you
don't have to
don't have to
overthink this
overthink
stuff,
it.
folks. Have a good offering. Solve a problem
Yes.
for people.
Yes.
People will buy clarity over creativity every single
I
day.
agree. I
Yeah.
agree.
So, can you give us a short little taste of what that training is? Again, going back to your stories, your strategy. For our listeners right now, what could they do in this story as your strategy framework? What would you tell them to do?
Okay. So first get clear on those things, right? What am I going towards? What's my mission, vision, values? What does my audience care about, deeply care about, right? Where can I find some stories that intersect with what is the emotional driver behind that problem and where maybe I've had a similar struggle with the same base emotional driver, right? Like was it fear? Was it shame? Was it fear of loss? Is it confidence? Is it clarity? Like, what's the problem? And what are you feeling that you can then tell a resonant, relatable story? So that's like the sort of the first piece. Then it's really sharing your process as you are thinking through it, as you're building it, as you're doing it, literally building in public, right? Sharing your struggles as much as your wins, right? Creating those points of resonance and relatability, noticing every day, noticing not only what is happening in your life and how you can make meaning out of it and how you can tie it back to your business, but what's catching your attention online. What are you reading? What industry trends are you seeing? And how can you make meaning and make sense of that for your ideal audience? Because ultimately, I think that's where we're going now, as everyone has sort of stated at this point, with AI now being the expert and being able to pull expertise, what the people who are really rising to the top and standing out in this framework heavy world are the people who are helping us make sense of it all, make meaning out of it all, reminding us, helping us figure out what it means to be human and how to connect with other humans in the process, and really looking at trends and culture and what's shaping our industries and where we need to be placing our bets, essentially, right? So I think meaning makers as storytellers is probably one of the most relevant skills that's going to help you build your business as everything
Yeah.
is evolving, you know?
And this isn't anything new because, since our ancestors navigated and survived the savannah 300,000 years ago, they were using stories as meaning-making tools, as learning tools. It's ultimately the very first learning tool we Homo sapiens ever had, and it's what has made us the fastest growing, most invasive species ever because we think, plan, organize, and act in story.
Mm-hmm.
And just because the bots have shown up and people are freaking out about AI and whatever, it is that meaning-making machine through not just the content you get, but how you evoke the emotion and connect with that person across from you. And I had Guarva, this guy, I'm going to butcher his name again, Bhattacharya on a couple weeks ago when we were talking about AI, and he said the thing that will never change, and I really love this, the thing that will never, ever change in the human experience with AI is that people want to be heard.
Yes. Right? And but it's so much easier said than done, right? And I think this is where people struggle. It's like how do you help someone feel heard or feel seen? And the biggest struggle, the biggest challenge is really being able to name the thing that people are feeling, but wrap it up in your own experience, right? And that feels like you're exposing yourself. That feels scary. This is where the whole vulnerability piece comes in. And I'll give you an example that really resonated, I think, with my audience recently. Is I've been pretty successful in building my business, but it doesn't mean that I still don't have those emotional dips and ups and downs that every entrepreneur does, right? Maybe not so much you, Park, because you've been doing it for much longer than I have, but
Oh God, no! Even after 40
even
years,
after
it still
40
haunts me.
years, and
Yep.
and it's so, I mean, it's such a relief, and it's so inspiring to hear you say that even after 40 years, you still have these dips. And so I talked openly about this the other day. I'm like, I had one of those moments where I was just like, I don't know if I know what I'm doing, where I'm going with this. Am I going to be able to make money next year? And it was all triggered because I bought a new car. And so I had these new car payments, right? And
What'd you
I
buy?
bought a Mazda CX-90, which is a big car, more than I actually needed, but I'm an easy upsell. I went in all on my own, like I don't know anything about cars. And usually I would rely on like my ex-husband to do this kind of thing. But I was like, yeah, I'm a strong, independent, woman now. I can do this on my own. But I don't know anything about buying cars. I make rash decisions under pressure. The guy sold me on a story and I knew what he was doing. I couldn't see what he was doing, but I was like, oh, I'm buying into the story. And he upsold me on this car and I drove off the lot and immediately had buyer's remorse. But I think what it was I was already like in one of those like sort of dips where I was unsure of my next step, and that just triggered like a whole emotional avalanche of like, am I going to be able to make these car payments? Is my business going to work? And so I started Googling jobs, right? I like went on LinkedIn and I was like, who's hiring for a content marketer? And
You were
then I was, and
catastrophizing.
and it, like I have a very supportive, wonderful partner now. He's a teacher. He's very grounded. And he said, Renee, you have these episodes like once a quarter, and you're very busy this week. Is looking for full time jobs really the best way to spend your day? Let's focus on the things I can focus on. Let's get this done. I wrote this story in my newsletter, and about 10 people responded. Oh, you look for jobs too sometimes. Like that, it was just thank you for naming that. I thought I was alone, right? I helped people feel seen by
Mm-hmm.
sharing this very real story because I'm not the only one that experiences this. Even after 40 years, we still have these moments, right? And the more I think we can just show up honestly like that, the more we really help people feel seen and don't damage I didn't damage my credibility in that. I think I made myself more trustworthy and more likable,
Yeah.
and more relatable. And therefore, no one's not going to hire me because I'm having these doubts. And if they decide they're not going to hire me and are judging me for this, then they're not someone I'd be wanting to do business with anyway, right? They're not someone
Mm-hmm.
I need in my tribe. So
Yeah.
I try to encourage people to remember this and just say, take that first step. Just put something out there that feels a little bit unsafe and see how it feels, right? See how it lands.
Well, just like you did with your beta group, you put it out there. If I did this, taught you about short stories and building your business, would you be remotely interested? And you had 25 pings on it. That's pretty damn good.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
know?
this was
Yeah.
encouraging.
And I think maybe you and I are at different points in our career. You obviously a lot younger, newer to the world that I am in this world, so I don't have nearly those concerns anymore because I've been there, done that, seen it. I've put myself in some of the craziest situations you ever possibly imagine, and got through it, and it was just fine. But I'll tell you, in my early 60s, which I am, in launching this tech company with this Story Cycle Genie AI with two really brilliant guys that are building the back end of it. I'm the front of the house. They're kind of the back of the house in story prompting or engineer prompting and all then the development that goes into where the Story Cycle Genie resides in this Brightsea, completely locked down platform. A lot of people would look at me and they go, what the hell are you doing? Aren't you supposed to be retiring? And I go, retiring from what? I haven't worked for anybody but myself since 1995, number one. And number two, but what do you know about AI and this sort of thing? And I go, well, yeah, that's true. It's my IP. I'm working with two really brilliant guys that understand the AI in the back end, and they have taught me a lot in the process. But I can tell you, Renee, I had every opportunity to doubt myself. As I had more and more people coming to me like, what are you thinking? Why are you doing this? And I'm just like, what else am I going to do? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But we've had just tremendous feedback on it. And every now and again, I'll wake up and I'll go, oh, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm going to fall flat on my face and they'll look at me and say, yeah, time to retire. Come on the golf course. You don't need to be starting a tech company anymore. So I hear you. It's easy to fall into that. And I think that's a survival mechanism. It's our limbic brain going, oh, Renee, be careful.
Right.
You're in status quo right now. That's safe.
Right.
You don't need a new car and all the risk that comes with that. And we all have to deal with that. But know that that's just a natural part of being human beings.
Yep.
It just happens.
Just have to, and it really just helps you can rationalize it, have the awareness of it, and still feel it. And for me, at least, talking about it openly and having other people say, oh, me too, is what actually helps me get over it, and persevere and push, and move forward. So.
You're so right. Well, we went in, unbeknownst to you, of course, and we ran your brand through the Story Cycle Genie. And I know you haven't really had a chance to look at it too much, but I wanted to read something. And your company, your brand is A Good Reputation.
Yep.
Right? Number one, why and how did you land on that name, that brand for you, for what you provide?
Because and I was like, what are we all doing here? What is brand? What is story? What are we all trying to achieve here? What gives me flexibility, to grow into it? I was like, we're all just trying to have a good reputation, but not just a good reputation and not like people think of us, think highly of us. But I really wanted to focus on people building good businesses for the greater good, right? So originally I had an interview series where I was interviewing founders and focusing on like their one approach that they felt, their one differentiated approach that they felt really led to the success of their business. And I got so many things, Park. I got, I really leaned into unscalable things. Or I was brutally honest, or I interviewed 500 people before launching my first product. There was always something interesting and different. But these are people that were really building something, I think, on behalf of the greater good and for humanity and not just to make lots and lots of money, so a deeper purpose behind their work. So that was sort of the origin of the name, double meaning.
Gotcha. So we pulled it up, and this is my little secret weapon now whenever I have a guest on. I know you fill out all the bio information and give me story points, whatever, which I love. Thank you very much. But this also takes me on a deeper dive into your brand and what you're about. And so, and you were talking earlier about these emotional triggers, these buying triggers. which sits right at the top of our overall story cycle system. And it named 3 primary audiences for you, the number one being mission-driven startup founders. Is that what you're looking for? And mission-driven, again, kind of plays to a good reputation. They're in it to do good while making money.
Yes, I still do work with mission-driven founders, but I realize that a lot of I kind of have 2 separate businesses and 2 separate marketing arms, and one of them is really heavily relies on networking and public speaking and doing workshops and really uh, capitalizing on the fact that I'm in the Bay Area and in this world. But really, my whole online persona has sort of shifted to really focusing on these other these other entrepreneurs, service-based business owners, just because it's so much easier to talk about building my own business and attracting that audience, you know. And I also just understand their business model a little bit more since I'm not really in the startup founder space trying to raise capital and talking to investors. And it's a different world with a different set of issues.
So your position statement, again, as the genie pulled from your website, is something to the point of a good reputation transforms mission-driven founders and businesses into compelling, authentic brands by uncovering their existing stories and translating them into strategic narratives that build trust, attract investment, and drive meaningful connections.
Yeah, that's still true. That's true.
Still true? Is it missing something, though? Is it missing something from the networking side of it or the speaking side?
I think what it's highlighting is a struggle that I've always had with having 2 distinct audiences, right? I think this is something that a lot of business owners struggle with, having audiences that have different needs, wants, desires, and
Well, let me ask you this then. Okay, so you are a single individual. Your enterprise is you and your capabilities, and you have 2 distinct audiences. What do they have in common? What is the one problem that you are solving for both audiences?
They struggle to tell a consistent narrative. They struggle to stand out. They struggle to resonate, and also don't know how to get more reach through their content, how their brand, shows up in the world, shows up on the internet. So that is a consistent, that is sort of the intersection. But I do believe that the more, it's easier when you can be crystal clear on the audience that you're serving. It's a way easier business model, right? Because you can speak more in more nuance to to the issues that are top of mind.
Well, let me ask you this then, Renee. Of the 2 audiences, which one makes up 80% of your business?
It has shifted in the past year. Now it is more service-based entrepreneurs. And so I have been working on shifting my positioning and branding to reflect that, but I haven't. It's more behind the scenes than, Yeah.
And so that's what the genie can do for you. It validates what you're already doing well. So like your position statement, you're saying, yeah, that's pretty close. But then it also reveals the gaps or the missed opportunities. Like, oh, I need to dial this in a little bit more because yes, it's accurate, but it's not specific now to what I do. And then it inspires, provides inspiration. In this case, the UVP gave you. Let me pull that up again here. Here's your unique value proposition. It believes, from what it read, is turn your mission into momentum through authentic storytelling. And now that's just a start. That's not like the end all, but it's something that you could, potentially, if you liked it, start working with and start bringing then your own voice to it and tweak it a little bit here and there.
Yeah. I think probably the main differentiator, what I really encourage people to do is really tap into that personal storytelling source and do that strategically in their content. So you're not just, well, this is what I had for breakfast and this is what it taught me about B2B sales, right? Which is not effective.
Yeah. Well, you had talked about then this new audience for you, the people in the service business. How do you define service businesses?
Professional service businesses. I mean,
Professional
yeah.
services. All right.
So it's a lot of other marketers, writers, therapists, coaches, organizational change leaders. I've worked with realtors. I've worked with financial advisors. So all professional services.
Yeah. So something that came to my mind, you can throw it out. You can leave this show right now. You can say, Park, that's the stupidest thing I've ever
Let's hear
heard.
it.
Playing to that service business is what you really do then is how you help them put their own stories in service to their business.
Oh, that's good. I do like that, Park. You're good.
Playing
Have you
off
done
the
this
service
before?
business, but
Yeah. I like that.
only 40 years worth. But this idea of again working through the story cycle, Jeannie, is like, okay, does that's right, yep, that's good. No, that's kind of changed here and whatever. And now when we boil it down, and for any of you listening out there, if you have two distinct audiences, which we all want 3 or 4 or 5, we think that's how you build a business. It's not. You focus on one. Yeah. Just ask yourself, it's the Pareto principle. What one persona makes up 80% of your business? And you will never go wrong with that. So it might even be, Renee, at some point you have to start saying no to that other persona, that other customer group that you used to service because you're so focused on this one professional services firm, helping them put their stories in service to themselves.
Yep. Yeah. Your story and service to yourself. I like that. I like that play on words. Yeah. I wonder.
Well,
Park,
it's also talking about storytelling is latent, right? It sits there, and you do such a great job of uncovering and revealing these stories, or showing people how to do it, and then bringing them to life. And when they tell the stories in a vulnerable, authentic way, like you do, they're going to grow their business.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I'd love to. I'm wondering if you've ever struggled with this sort of choosing an audience problem, and it's for me, it hasn't been because there's opportunity in more in one place than in the other. It's more just I'm a multi-passionate creative entrepreneur, and I just I get bored. That's why I got bored with my food blog, and so I wanted to make sure that my audience is diverse and solving a diverse set of problems in diverse industries. And I know if I niched into, say, just coaches, I could probably be a lot more successful because I'm so clear in who I'm talking to and the problem I'm solving. But I know myself, and that's boring. And also, everyone can benefit from the problem that I'm solving. So, but I'm curious to hear if that's something that you've struggled with, or if you've always been pretty clear.
No, never. I wasn't clear until I actually closed my ad agency. So I ran Park & Co. My wife and I built it over the course of 20 years in Phoenix. We launched it in 1995. And it was fun the first 10 years, traditional advertising, so forth, creativity, fun, interesting stuff. And then the digital world showed up, and I was confounded by it. I go, what? I didn't believe in it. Our clients asked us to start buying a lot more digital stuff, and we didn't know how to do it. I didn't think their money was being well spent, blah, blah, blah. And so we were, for survival, I mean, we also went through the great global recession in the late 2000s, aughts, and that impacted us greatly. We had to lay off a number of people, and then it was like survival mode. I got to be all things to all people, just take whatever business I could at the time, which was a stupid thing because we ended up with bad clients that were horrible to work with, that didn't pay their bills. And I okay, well, this sucks. So what am I doing wrong? And it was because I was all over the place. We found a niche that I really liked, and that was in sustainability and green marketing when green marketing was a thing. We were doing a lot of work with nonprofits and other sustainability groups, and I even taught at Arizona State University for a time, for 5 years, as an adjunct in their School of Sustainability. And I really liked the whole purpose-driven brand thing and working on that. But I found it was still very difficult. And I thought at the core of it, now remember, I was 55 when I finally got my act together. I closed my agency, and people said, what the hell are you doing? Why don't you sell it? And I said, well, because then I'll be beholden to whoever buys it for 5 years, and I'm going to lose another 5 years late in my career, and I don't want to do that. And it was not until I went through all of that I realized my hardcore thing like yours is storytelling. I was fascinated, absolutely fascinated by how does it work? Why does it work? How can we teach other people how to do it? And early in my life, I got a degree in music composition and theory and communications. I knew I'd never make any money as a composer. I figured I could in the ad world. I'd bring those two. Well, interestingly enough, 35 years later, I'm teaching story composition and theory to help commerce and help people become sustainable and have the impact in the world they're wanting to make. And when I find people that are using the same frameworks for evil, I like to call them out and say, look, this is what's going on, folks. This is why the Trump administration can move the MAGA group. Look at what he's doing with story framework, starting with the and, but, therefore. So it took me a long time, and I think maybe you are just in that mode right now, going through, as you started your company, focusing on one audience, and then like, okay, that's sort of boring, because I was in the same way too. If I work in a lot of different industries, I won't get bored. Well, that's a lousy way to run a company. Get focused. It's a lousy way. Really good at one thing. And so now it sounds like you've got that. And then I would say for you, the next question I would ask you is, all right, for those service professionals, helping them put their story and service to themselves, what excites you about that?
Well, what excites me is just seeing the shift for them in their own marketing and running their own business. It's like it reignites a fire in them.
And why does that excite you?
Because I just love that the passion is contagious. You know, they actually enjoy doing their own marketing again. They enjoy building again. I think what so often happens, you know, we all start our businesses because we want more freedom ultimately, right? But then we trap ourselves in these businesses and we start resenting them. Right. I think this happens for a lot of people. And it's because you have to, you know, there's so much involved in business beyond solving that problem, right? It's figuring out the business model, it's figuring out your offers, it's then the marketing piece, and then figuring out the social media marketing piece and how it all, you know, how you bring people in and how all of it. Right. And I feel like what happens, I don't feel like I've seen this happen when we start grounding it again in like the purpose, and then being able to articulate that purpose in a way that moves people, and you start getting feedback for it, right? You start getting all this validation because it's finally clicking for you and for everybody else. It just reignites that passion and that motivation to do it, and the understanding of why you're doing it and why any of it matters. It just gives meaning to your work again. And that is really meaningful for me. And I'm just one of those people that's always like looked for meaning in my work, right? Like I need my work to feel purposeful. And so that's why I think I've jumped around from thing to thing. And now I'm just like very comfortably sitting in helping others ignite that purpose and find that meaning again is very fulfilling for me. And I think just, you know, as you know, I think just becoming a better storyteller is not just great for your business, it's great for your life. Like it has all these knock-on effects of having deeper relationships, better connections, you know, making time slow down because you're noticing the world a little bit more closely. And what I encourage people is like, don't just focus on telling better stories, but like really hearing other people's stories. And you'll start to see what that unlocks for you. So ask questions, go a little bit deeper, you know, share in an effort to have someone reciprocate with something a little bit more connected. Yeah.
Mhm. So what I heard then is what really excites you with everything you said is to use storytelling and teach people how to use stories to free them from the drudgery of their businesses. So they love their business, they're into their business, they got their business going. It might be a successful business, but they're hating it. It's kind of like when I started not really liking my agency and running an agency 10 years in. And I ran it for another 10 years trying to find my way out. And my way out was through story. It's what triggered me and what got me excited about it. When I can show people how to do this, and then to your point, they use it and they send me notes like, "Oh my God, I just closed a deal with using the and but therefore, or this new brand is resonating so much, I'm attracting my exact customer. That's it. That's so worth it because you, in your case, you are freeing them from the complexity and drudgery of the day-to-day logical, reason-driven business by tapping into the emotion and the passion that story brings.
You said it.
There you go. Because I hear you. I feel you. That's why I do what I do as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, Renee, this has been great. Where can people learn more about you?
The best place is through my newsletter, where I do share storytelling frameworks and how to build a good reputation, a good brand, and enjoy the process. It's a goodreputation.online. And I am very active on LinkedIn at Renee Lynn Frojo. So I'm constantly practicing what I preach on there and teaching through doing a lot of the time. And getting a great response. So pretty much all my business is organic inbound leads. So I am
Awesome.
But the proof is in my pudding, that's for sure.
Are you going to do another beta group, another cohort?
I am. I'm launching another cohort in the fall. So I'm taking all the learnings from this one and building something even better. And in the meantime, I'm forming the community, the evergreen community from the past cohort and in-person retreats that I've hosted. I also host annual in-person retreats for service businesses. We just came back from Mexico City. And yeah.
And people interested in that can ping you either on LinkedIn or through your contact page on your website. And then finally, now that we've gone through all of this, is name your ideal customer. For everyone that's listening here, who would be the ideal customer to work with you on these things?
Someone who is has set off on their own. Maybe has lost their way a little bit, has lost that fire for their business because they're having trouble really playing the online marketing game and communicating the problem that they solve, and would just like to connect more effectively with their audience. So anyone building a solo business that's doing that right now for the purposes of this podcast, I think that is my idea.
So for an ABT, for them might be, so you are a successful entrepreneur building a solo business, and you've had great joy in helping people achieve what they need to accomplish through your service-based business. But you are exhausted, maybe even overwhelmed, because you've lost a bit of the passion due to the complexity of marketing and not maybe truly embracing and understanding and sharing your authentic story. Therefore, reignite your energy in your company with Renee through your story as your strategy process. And let's put your story in service to you to have the impact in the world you want.
Beautifully done. I'm going to go rewrite my about bio right now based on that script.
It's the and but therefore. It's based on the
it's one of the ones I teach
in the story cycle genie, and it's so powerful just to get that foundational narrative.
Yeah, I talk about simplifying it. It's all ABT, right? Like if you only learn one storytelling framework, it's that, and they all are that. They are just they take different forms.
That's why we call it the DNA of story. And, but, therefore. Well, Renee, thank you so much. This has been an absolute delight. And I know you said you've been listening to the show for a couple of years, so it's great to have a listener on as a guest.
You were my first resource when I decided I was going to become a better storytelling instructor, not just a storyteller for my own business. So I'm so honored to be here, Park. I've learned so much from you, and I can't believe I got a chance to be on the show. So I appreciate you and your questions.
Well, I'm delighted that you're here. Thank you for reaching out, and keep doing the great work you're doing,
All
Renee.
Right. Thanks, Park.
Have a good day. Thanks for joining us today. And if you, like Renee, are maybe going after too many audiences at the one time, well, follow my guidance and get super focused on that one audience that makes up for 80% of your business. Believe me, you won't regret it. And one of the best ways to do that, of course, is to use the Story Cycle Genie to hone in your brand story. So if you want to be a part of our soft launch in early July, register now at businessofstory.com/storycycle-genie. Now join me next Monday when we will have another amazing brand story artist right here for you like Renee. And until then, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that one sensational. Thanks so much for listening.